thrill seeking, edge of your seat, biting your nails. Don't want to look at the screen but can't look away because you're afraid to miss what will happen next. You might think I'm talking about action movies or suspenseful movies, but I'm talking about horror movies. This evening I'm going to share with you the evolution of horror movies from the first influence of literature to today's horror movies. Now, Gothic influences for horror movies began in 1764 with Horace Walpole and The Castle of Otranto. This book was about a prince who had a curse and was followed by supernatural phenomenon and ghosts and death. And eventually he had to give up his throne to avoid any more of that heartbreak and troublesome. And according to Encyclopedia Britannica, Mr. Walpole got the influence of this book from his own house, which was Strawberry Hill. He had nightmares and dreamed of ghosts, and specifically a gigantic hand in armor, and that armor played a big role in his book. And other Gothic influences include Mary Shelley with Frankenstein or Bram Stoker with Dracula. Now, going on, once the influences got around, then the first horror movie came out, which came out in 1896, and it was Le Manoir du Diable by George Mills. And this can also be translated into the House of the Devil or The Haunted Castle. And this, even though this is considered the first horror movie, this movie was only 2 minutes long and featured a great multitude of characters like skeletons, ghosts, goblins, etc. And so after this movie was out and created, this got juices flowing for many other people who wanted to get their start in the horror movie genre, and this was one of the influences for creating more horror movies. And then sound became available in the late 20s, and that's when what we consider the classics started showing up. The classics like Dracula starring Bela Lugosi or Frankenstein starring Boris Karloff started to come into play, and that's where they got their start, and that's how those characters are remembered. But then at the end of the 30s is when according to Salem Press, they started becoming more saturated, and moviegoers weren't as pleased to go and watch them. And so, and then starting at the end of the 30s to the 50s is when horror movies weren't coming out as often, because in 1945, the United States dropped the atomic bomb, and that got directors' minds thinking about new horror movies to come out, and that's where what we call B movies came out. They were about mutants, such as Godzilla and the Blob, and then that's where zombies came into play. Where George Romero debuted his movie Night of the Living Dead. And then going on after the 60s, start the 70s, and the 70s to the 90s involved slashers, and that's this brought a whole new level of scare to the horror movie genre. You got Halloween, Friday the 13th, and this genre was all about new movies, sequels, and making movies about book adaptations for movies. And this is where Stephen King's It came into play, and this brought a whole new meaning to the word chlorophobia, which is the phobia of clowns. And then after the 90s, start the 2000s, and the 2000s is where the new age movies started to come in. The horror movies that are out today mainly rely on blood and sex scenes, and mainly the movies that come out today are all about ghosts, which isn't a bad idea, but you can only go so far with ghosts until it's repeating the same storyline. So, in conclusion, whether you like horror movies for the thrill or you hate them, they have pretty much evolved and shown no sign of stopping. It has been 256 years since the first Gothic novel was released. 132 years later, the first horror movie was out. And little did the director of that horror movie know he would be changing the movie industry for the rest of its life. And so I just want to leave y'all with this one little reminder. basically every horror movie is inspired by true events or based on a true story. So just sleep tight.